source to screen. And, the whole purpose of it is to help bring people into that alignment. The idea is that great ideas are trying to find us, right? It's not us finding great ideas. Carl Jung said, ideas come and they find you. And that is actually so true.
My name is Zenka Caro. I'm founder of LightNet, and my passion and purpose is to expand what we believe is possible. Paola Di Florio is also in that expansion. She made a movie called Awake about Yogananda, and she said during the process, she felt literally her consciousness expanding. And she started to ask herself, what is wanting to happen? What is wanting to come through? She's had an incredible award-winning career. She's been nominated for Emmys and Oscars, and she's famous for films like Home of the Brave that focus on women and their contribution as they stand up, find their voice, and find their alignment. I love this interview.
I think the lesson was just to keep showing up. And every time I showed up again, and Peter showed up again, and our company and our partners all showed up again, we showed up differently. And there was always like a little bit of a shift, a little bit of a change, a lesson that we learned, a letting go of some previous idea that we were hanging and clinging on to. All the spiritual lessons were there to learn and for us, for our own spiritual growth. And also because something else, and this is the big lesson always, I think, is that question I always ask is, what's trying to happen? So, my soul's mission really goes hand in hand with an awakening that I had that I wasn't looking for, that came into my life. It was a blessing now, from the perspective that I'm in now. It was a blessing. It was after making a spiritual film. It was a film about a yoga master named Paramahansa Yogananda. It was called Awake, the Life of Yogananda. And I had no idea. In fact, I just have to give credit to my husband and partner, Peter, because if it wasn't for Peter, I probably would not have made this film. But Peter was like, I think there's something here. I think we really need to explore this. And he was right. So we took the meeting, and in that first meeting, I knew that something was happening. I knew that something was happening, meaning that we met with the organization, Self-Realization Fellowship, that Yogananda founded. And I knew in that moment that something about the times needed this message. And it hit home for me. And I knew in the room, I could feel the antenna going up, like something's trying to happen. And so I followed that. I followed that voice. What I didn't know is that at the end of a really long, laborious process of making this film, just took 6 years, that I would find myself in a very, very particular place in my life that I didn't recognize, which was that something was stirring within me. I'd gone to India. I had had a physiological shift happening in my body. Consciousness was shifting in my being, and I didn't really know what to make of it. And at the end of making that film, I went back to business as usual, and I took on a job, working on a TV series. And I thought, something isn't feeling right. And I knew that my direction was moving forward. I couldn't go back. And then I couldn't go back to being the person that at that point I felt like I was, and I'd identified myself as being, perhaps maybe even been rewarded in some ways of being that person. And it felt like it was a box. And suddenly I just didn't fit in that box anymore. And the question was, what is my purpose? What am I doing now if I'm not that? Now, I was a mother, I was a wife, I was, a sister and a daughter and all these other things, these other roles that we play in our lives. And I was a filmmaker. But I just didn't know that something really strong within me was shifting and moving and I was becoming something else. But before becoming something else, I was unraveling. So that unraveling period for me was massive. I mean, it was a slow undoing over a period of 7 years. And at first it was really slow, then it got really fast. So the really slow was me stepping back into my old roles, but it feeling kind of different. And then something happened. I went to the Parliament of World Religions for no reason. In other words, I just got this call to go to the Parliament of World Religions. I was like, why am I doing this? I couldn't answer it for myself. But I had a very dear friend at the time, Philip Helmick, who was working at the Shift Network. And, he was a dear friend, and I could speak to him about these shifts and changes that were happening within me. And I told him I'm really called to go. I don't know why. I'm going to go, but I need a reason, And he said, well, why don't you write an article for The Catalyst? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, and then I can get you a media pass. And I was like, perfect. So I went to the Parliament, and I knew at the Parliament when I got there that something really big was shifting in the world. There was that sense, the Parliament of World Religions is like 10,000 people from all over the world that descend upon a place. In this case, it was Salt Lake City, Utah. And, the issues of the world are in discussion at the plenary. And it was the first ever parliament that honored women. So it'd been going on for 150 years, but this was the first women's assembly at the parliament. And what we saw was this big shift happening with women speaking from all over the world in positions of authority, coming into positions of authority and responsibility in their respective religious backgrounds. And the men from those countries and from those organizations just needing this shift to happen in support of these women. I saw people crying. I saw feet were stomping. Like, it was passionate in the plenary. And it was also the year that Marianne Williamson spoke to this issue of women taking these roles of responsibility, and people cheered her on and said, Marianne for president. Like, it was really, really big moment. And I remember then thinking, I don't know what to do with this, but I'm here for a reason. So I went back and I started to put together what I thought were a series of really good projects that I was going to go get funded. And all the people that I normally would go for funding just looked at me blankly, like I felt crazy. I felt like I was speaking a foreign language. Of course, I live in Hollywood. It's like I'm working in the industry. It's, yes, I'm a documentary filmmaker and I have a company, but it was as though I were speaking a language that nobody was connecting with. And it felt really strange for me. It's like doors were slamming instead of opening. There were a few accomplishments that, like I'd been nominated for an Academy Award. I'd been nominated for an Emmy. And this was maybe 2 years after the Emmy nomination. I thought doors would open. But instead it was like, wait, who are you? Wait, no, we don't want any of that. So it felt incredibly lonely. And we had just been 2 years prior to all of this with Awake. We had just been to the Illuminate Film Festival. And that was the first time that I'd ever been to a film festival where I felt like, again, the same feeling I had at the Parliament. Something is shifting and changing, and these people know it. These people know what's happening. So I felt this incredible kinship there. And, just year after year, we would just go back. My husband and I would go back, and we just felt like this is the mission. And at that point, we held up a flag and we said, let's shift the company's purpose. Let's make this, we have to make films that awaken the human spirit. And we just declared it. And we started speaking on panels at Illuminate. And then we were invited to other panels, and we went, to India. We started collecting people from around the world that were part of this movement. And that's when I started having these downloads. When I started to move and lean in, instead of feeling sorry for myself and shut out, but courageously just leaning in and saying, yep, doors are slamming, and I'm going to sit here. I'm going to sit in this, and I'm just going to see what it does, because I can't do anything else. And so that's when the people from, Australia, from India, from South America, from Hong Kong. All these people started to appear in my life, in our lives. And we had branded, sort of newly branded Counterpoint. And we came up with, there were some projects that they were really bold and they were way too big for us. And we knew it, but they were downloads. And it was like, it's like when you're handed something that you don't have a choice not to do. You just have to figure out what your role is, and it's like, okay, I think my role is to just start speaking about this and seeing who might help. And we did that. And initially we had a project that came into being called Come Together. Now I'm talking 7 years ago. This was 2017. And it felt very, very aligned. It felt like, yep, this is what the world needs. It collected the ideas from the parliament. It brought together the dreams that I was having, the things that were coming through. All of it came together, and it was leaning towards this new world that was forming, that was really about everyone sort of raising the consciousness in the world, speaking about East and West coming together. Because, it's like the ingenuity, the scientific discoveries of the West and the spiritual acumen and, brilliance of the East needed to come together to bring balance in the world. And so this project formed. It was called Come Together. And it was a peace and music festival that took place and was launched in Rishikesh, India. Why Rishikesh? Because that was the place that drew the Beatles. That was the place that the Beatles went to in 1968. And following that, they wrote all their anthems of peace, love, and unity. And the whole world was starting to wake up. It was a big moment in 1968 and following. And so it was like, that was an example. It was an example of like what we need to do. Let's come to this place, Rishikesh, which is the birthplace of yoga, where the ancient rishis went to sit in caves and get the wisdom of how to live. And let's make it a 3-day festival. And the first day can just be let's make that first day a think tank for how to live in the world. Let's bring all the thought leaders of the world. The second day, let's make it a pilgrimage. Let's make this sacred. Let's walk to that place where the Beatles went to from our partner ashram, where there's a stage in the water in the Ganga River. Let's walk over to the Beatles ashram, to the Maharishi ashram. Let's get partners from all over the world. And then the third day is bringing global musicians from East and West on the same stage together. So instead of like Beyonce goes to India, it's like, let's bring the artists from the West and the East, let them sit on a stage together, let them sing together. Let us all feel that. Let's understand that it's about coming together. And it's not just about the music and the pilgrimage. It's literally the technology that, we're in the world of information. How are we going to live with this information? How are we going to live with this technology? It's not going away, And again, the balance that we need more of that comes from ancient wisdom. Let's bring this together and let's all come together to rethink how to be human, how to live optimally on the planet. And so this project and some others started to unfold, started to come through. And, I think the lessons from all of this, we made progress, then we had setbacks. We made progress, then we had setbacks. There were moments, especially when COVID happened, where everything just fell apart, and I think the lesson was just to keep showing up. And every time I showed up again and Peter showed up again and our company and our partners all showed up again, we showed up differently. And there was always like a little bit of a shift, a little bit of a change, a lesson that we learned, a letting go of some previous idea that we were hanging and clinging on to. All the spiritual lessons were there to learn and for us, for our own spiritual growth. And also because something else, and this is the big lesson always, I think, is that question I always ask is, what's trying to happen? And how do we collaborate more? Who do we have to collaborate with? Because that seems to be what's constantly being asked of. So, that's it in a nutshell, really, is how I think my purpose was aligned with this awakening and owning it instead of denying it, owning it instead of running away from it. Because it was scary. Definitely. Those 7 years of the unraveling of the ego and these ideas of who I thought I was, those were rough, plus I'm raising children and, it's so much learning and some of it really fast. Like I said, big lessons when, my mother passed away, they're like markers, these landmarks when big things happened and they were just opportunities of real big growth if I would allow it. And so that really became the lesson of allowing and learning what does that mean and how to do it. Flow comes in the most bizarre ways. So if we can just get out of our heads and not second guess it and, and just trust, I mean, of course, that's a tall order, but that is ultimately what it comes down to. So when I think about, people that are not living in alignment or who haven't found their purpose, it brings up a lot of compassion in me. It also brings out like like a sense of wanting to help. I want to get in there and say like, I totally get that. I understand. And I want to help them find their voice. And I feel like that's what I'm being asked to do. I'm being asked to use my skill set and to use the things that I've always used, the just the skills and the talent that I came into the world with, but to use them differently and to help other people find that alignment. So Peter and I run a creativity lab called Source to Screen. And, the whole purpose of it is to help bring people into that alignment. The idea is that great ideas are trying to find us, right? It's not us finding great ideas. Carl Jung said, ideas come and they find you. And that is actually so true because when do they find us? They find us when we are actually living in alignment with ourselves, when we are loving ourselves, when we are accepting ourselves fully, 1,000%, right? Because the more we are accepting who we are, the uniqueness of who we are, because we are so, each one of us, so individual and unique and also connected. If we play our role, what we're doing is we're just being in alignment with who we are and fully accepting that. And when we are in that place, ideas come and find us because then we're a perfect vessel for that to execute. And I think that's the purpose of this lab, right? And we are all lab rats in the lab, including Peter and I. We are all experimenting with living life, with creativity, and being the source or, the conduit for source to work through us. And what we find is that people come to the lab and they come into alignment. They might have something, but they don't either trust that it's really what they need to be doing, or they trust, but they don't know how to execute, or they need support in some way, or it's like they're stuck. They started it, they're stuck, and they need to kind of move into the next place of it. What happens is that while we're doing this, we take 3 days and we break it down into its spiritual lessons that are applied to creativity. Creation, which is getting out of your own way so that ideas can come and find you. Manifestation, taking those ideas and bringing them down into the real world, right? Not the real with capital R, like this physical world, because they can't just stay floating out here. They got to actually concretize, and we got to accept that we are living in the physical, right? And then there's transmission, which is now I've got this thing, but am I reaching people? Am I reaching who I want to reach or who needs to be reached? And then breaking that down, parsing it out and really figuring out, how do I do that? And so at the end of these 3 days, you're hopefully feeling empowered enough And what we notice is that each group that comes to do this, they're weirdly aligned with each other. And literally, we start these WhatsApp groups and they can't stop talking to each other. And some people have come to work with each other. And it's really exciting. It's exciting to see people trusting, finding their voice, reaching out, leaning in, and finding ways to actually express in ways that bring them joy, that give purpose to their lives. I mean, I think that the effect I have on other people by living my purpose is that I'm just more of use in the world. I'm useful to spirit. I'm useful to other people because my purpose is actually impacting them. My purpose is to help draw them out. If almost in the creative work that I do, if somehow it touches somebody even an iota, right? If somebody by watching a film that I make just branches out and grows consciously, even a little bit on their path, that to me is success. That's success. Because it's like, I love the quote from today that Laura said about Mother Teresa. It's like, we don't all get to have great impact. Is that what it was? Yeah, we don't all get to have great impact, but we all get to make some impact or a small amount of impact with great amount of love. And that whole idea is exactly how I feel. Everyone can do that. And that is what I feel my purpose is to just listen to my heart, to act from a place of integrity and from alignment. And even if it's just a little bit, but I do it with a lot of love, I feel like I will impact others because that's the natural law. I feel like we're all here there is a guidance system and it's within us. But that guidance system within us is informing us about natural law. And if we actually listen, we do the deep listening and get into that kind of alignment, then of course it's going to impact the greatest amount of people. I mean, if everybody was living their purpose and in alignment, we would be in flow. We would be expanding and creating and living in love. That's what I think would happen if we all were living from a place of deep alignment, is that there would just be a lot of love in the world.
Are you looking to begin your life of passion and purpose? We are waiting for you with our groups of 8 to 12. These loving teams are formed to look over our success data to find the fastest and funnest and most direct way for you to find your purpose and calling in life. To find out more, go to holomovement.net/purpose.